Hello Discovery Rich Stars, welcome to our third episode of my Paint With Me videos where I am doing a painting and you are invited to paint along with me, or you can just watch for fun. So this is going to be the third one that I'm doing. So the last one that I did was recommended by some students, and so this one is also coming to us recommended by students. So the first two that submitted a photo of the paintings they did was Bennett and Braden Davies, and here are their paintings. Here are a couple other paintings that have been turned in since then as well as a drawing. So Bennett Davies asked if I could do a painting for him that was based on the galaxy and outer space. And so I asked him if he wanted me to include something like rocket ships or alien ships or planet, and he said he would like multiple planets in his painting. So that's what we're gonna do today, and thank you so much for the idea to the Davies boys. So we are going to be painting a galaxy picture with multiple planets. I'm thinking 3. I don't have it all in my mind just yet, but we're gonna kind of find it out together. So if you want to paint with me, what we're going to be starting with is actually a black surface. So I actually have a black paper. I do also have black canvases, but I decided to paint on paper today so that if anybody out there wants to paint with me but they don't have canvases, you can just grab a piece of black construction paper if you have that. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started, I will say I was a little bit intimidated when Bennett gave me the idea of painting a galaxy painting, just because it's one of those things that is a little bit hard to paint, but also kind of easy to paint, because really any way you do it is probably gonna look right. And so for this one, I actually did pull up a picture and it had some how-to steps for how to paint a galaxy, and so I'll show you that here. So sometimes I don't even know how to do the things that I'm trying to do. So I'm gonna figure it out as I go, and I'm gonna see if I can follow some of these steps while also doing some of them just how I think might work. For this painting, like I said before, I do want to start with a black surface. If you don't have a black surface, but you do have white and black paint, you could easily just paint a canvas or even paint a paper black. But I am starting with a black piece of construction paper, and I have taped it on all 4 sides to this drawing board. You could just tape it to a piece of cardboard as well, just anything that's going to give it a sturdy edge. And by taping it down, you're going to keep the edges from rolling up, even when you remove the tape. I also have 2 paint brushes, and to start with, I wanted some of my stiffest brushes. These are going to be the ones that I usually would never reach for because they're so kind of jaggedy, and they're not my favorite brushes to paint with just because they're kind of beat up a little bit. But with this, the more beat up, the better. And if you actually have a sponge, you could use that too. I just don't happen to have a sponge that would be good for this painting. I also have my water cup, and these are the colors that I'm going to be using to start with. So you saw in the galaxy painting that I showed you, it's kind of like a dark black background, and then it had some cool toned colors for the galaxies. I wish I had a pink that I like, but I actually don't have a pink paint that I like, and I don't have any reds that I really love either. So kind of the same thing here with the purple. I always mix these 2 together because I can't find the perfect purple. I'm still on the hunt for the perfect. So to start a galaxy painting, we're going to do what's called pouncing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my rough beat up brushes, and I'm going to beat it up even worse. I'm going to go like this. See that? I want it to be really, really jaggedy. Jaggedy raggedy. Whoops, it's a little wet. So what I'm going to do is on my brush, I'm going to pounce. Pouncing is when you do this. I'm going to do it on the clean part of the plate. Basically think of it as bouncing like that. And that's called pouncing. So that's how I'm going to pick up my paint. That's how I'm going to drop off some paint. And it's how I'm going to put it on the paper. So here's what I do. I'm going to pounce a little bit in the white. Just a little bit, little bit, little bit. Tap it off. All right, let's start with blue. It might be the easiest to see. Pick up just a little bit. Come over here and pounce it off. Pounce, pounce, pounce. Pouncing means bouncing. I'm mixing them together a little bit. The end of my brush is nice and coated. So here we go. I'm just going to pick a spot on my paper here. So let's go right here. I like to keep these long but not straight. And I'm just lightly tapping the brush to the painting. So like this. Okay. So that's kind of how you start. It actually looks pretty cool already. So next time I go in, I'm going to pick up just a little bit more blue and not pick up any white, because I want this to be, sometimes I want it to be nice and subtle, which means a little harder to see, and sometimes I want it to be bright. Now what I noticed already is the blue is just covering the white, so let's go ahead and pick up a little bit more white so that that's not happening. I don't want to cover the white. I want to kind of make the 2 look like they're swirling around each other a little bit, the blue and the white. So I will announce, as I always do, the movie that I'm watching just in case you hear it. Today's movie is Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, Curse of the Black Pearl. It's the only one I like and it's the only one I watch. So today's movie is Pirates of the Caribbean #1. Now I was thinking about watching a space themed movie so that we could kind of have a whole space themed thing going on. But I was thinking about my favorite space themed movies and I really don't have a whole lot. I will say my #1 favorite space movie is an old 90s action movie called Armageddon. And it's one of my top 3 favorite movies actually, which is kind of embarrassing. So that's my favorite space movie as well as one of my top 3 favorite movies. And then after that, I love the space movies of WALL-E. I love Hidden Figures. And I especially love Apollo 13, especially the soundtrack. If you've never heard the soundtrack from Apollo 13, make sure to look it up, especially the song called Splashdown and Reentry. It's beautiful. All right, so what I'm working on here is kind of making it a little bit wider on this end and then letting it fade out up here. I'm not sure if that's exactly what I want to go for, but it's what we're going to leave it be for now. So now what I'm going to do is, I have a little bit of blue and white left on my brush. I'm going to kind of drop it off over here and make kind of just a second galaxy going like this. And you know what's funny is I actually think this one looks a lot nicer than this one. I think I overworked this one and that just means I did too much. I kind of do too much all the time, don't I? So if you have the same problem that I do where you feel like you just did too much, what we're going to do is we're actually going to let that dry and then we're going to pounce, which means bounce, some of the black paint over top of it because we're basically going to try to erase it a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my white paint a little bit, put it there. Let's do a little bit of green. I love this shade of green because it's kind of like an emerald green when you add a little white to it. So keeping in mind that we want to do a little bit less rather than more, I'm going to do kind of this spot up here. And I already think it's a little too white, so I'm gonna add a little bit more green. So this is why galaxy paintings are hard for me, and probably hard for a lot of people, is because really you just kind of have to put things down and see how it works, see if you like it. And there's no real right or wrong with galaxies. They're kind of just look how they look, and they're a whole mess of stars. All right, so I don't know, I think it looks okay. But keeping in mind that I already did too much on one of them, I'm gonna leave that one just how it is for now. Do I wanna keep going with this kind of stripy pattern? Maybe I don't. Maybe I want this one to be more of a shape. I know I said I was gonna leave it alone. Let's turn it into more of a shape. Maybe like this. And so some of this is very, very faded, which I actually really like. There's hardly anything in my brush anymore. And so I think it's actually turning out really nice when it just barely has anything on the brush. So I think I definitely did too much here. But maybe that can just be our brightest stripe. Maybe that'll be the planet system that we're trying to draw attention to. All right, I'm cleaning my brush. And I'm going to pick up some of my purple. I'm gonna try to dry it out really, really well because it works a lot better when your brush is really dry and really jaggedy raggedy. All right, make sure you really pound that brush down. I'm gonna pick up both types of purple at once and put it over there. I have way too much paint on this brush already. I can see it. Way too much paint on the brush. So I'm gonna come over here and get some of that off of there. All right, let's see. So for the purple, let's do this. Let's kind of make, let's do this. Whoa, did you see that water drip off of there? I have too much water on this brush. That happens sometimes, that's all right. All right, let's do it coming from here. Oh, that's a beautiful color. Oh yeah, this is my favorite. All right, coming from here. Kind of just really light pouncing. Pouncing means bouncing. And keeping in mind, I don't really want to do these stripes. I kind of want to get away from these stripes. I don't know if that's how space looks, but let's get away from that. Let's go over the blue and see what happens. If I just go over the blue. I do have to press a little bit harder when I'm trying to cover another color. Let's go this way. Uh-oh, more white is coming out of my brush. That's all right. I'm just gonna see what happens. One of the big keys to this is when you are mixing on your plate, make sure that you're not mixing like this. You're tapping in one, tapping in the other, and then you're tapping off the extra. Don't mix them together or else you're not gonna get any of those cool effects. Let's see, let's go, let's cover a little more of the blue because I'm not loving the blue. And I think I am gonna do speckle stars for this too. Kind of like how we did in the first one with the speckle stars. I think I'll do that for this one too, because it's the entire galaxy. We need speckle stars. So let's do this. Let's kind of make this purple one real big because it's my favorite color. All right, let's take a look at it. It's definitely big. Is it too big? Maybe. Let's see. Maybe the problem is that the other ones aren't quite big enough, or maybe they're not too small. Maybe I just need more of them. I really like how this green one turned out. Let's like put another green one right there to kind of fill that space. So I'm gonna tap in the green that I already kind of mixed up. Pick up a little more. It's a little too mixed up. All right, let's kind of, I want this to be really subtle, so I'm actually gonna try to get rid of some of that white that's on there. Subtle means it's kind of hard to see, so I'm gonna go with more of the plain green. The plain green's really dark, so sometimes it can be a little hard to see. Oh yeah, there we go. So I kind of want this to fade out and almost look like it's back to pure black. Okay, oh, that looks pretty cool. All right, what should we do here? Let's do, I guess we'll do purple there. And then, I almost don't want to touch this one because I like it so much, but I think it needs to be bigger. It's a little too small. Unless I do purple down there too. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll kind of make a whole purple theme and we'll go crazy with the purple. Let's do purple here. Again, let's pick up a little bit more of that dark purple so that it is a little more subtle. Oh, there we go. Subtle meaning a little bit hard to see. There we go, get real light with it so it kind of fades out. Really what I want here is texture. I want texture everywhere. So I want it to look like it is all full of stars and like there's no just empty black paper. All right, and then we're gonna do a little bit of blue right there. And then I'm wondering if we should come back here and fix this or if I should just plan to put one of my planets there. Maybe that's the best idea. That's what we'll do. I'll just put one of my planets on any of the spots I don't really like. Okay, that's a little too white. Let's add more blue. More blue, there we go. And I have paint dripping off my wrist, so it's dripping. Oh, it's dripping everywhere. There we go. Very light touches. Is this too subtle? There's hardly anything there. Should I go a little heavier? Let's go a little heavier. I'm not gonna worry about cleaning my brush. I'm just gonna pick up some purple. Is this, did I have purple here? I guess I did. It's definitely subtle. I know this is kind of an empty spot, but maybe it looks okay if there's one or two empty spots. And also if I don't like it later, I can just put a planet on top of it. So that's how we're going to do our galaxy background with like the Milky Ways and the galaxies, and I don't really know what else is there. So now we're gonna do our speckle stars. So I'm gonna try to find some clean white paint. This is the same as in the first video. So if you watched the first video on how to do speckle stars, this is the same thing. I'm making a puddle of white and I am mixing in water until it's so wet that it almost drips off my brush. So this is not quite dripping, but it's almost dripping. So I'm gonna squeeze off the extra, squeeze off the extra. Make sure you're not wearing anything you love. And I'm going to fling paint at the painting like this. Watch how I do this. Hold this hand steady. This hand doesn't move except to move across like this. This hand does all the work. So here we go. I'm going to fling. Pull back on the bristles. Fling, fling, fling. Make sure that you are not doing this in a space where the paint would stain something that you really care about. This is probably an activity best done outside, especially if you're using acrylic paint, which will stain everything. So in a galaxy, I like a lot of stars. This definitely gives it a lot of texture. All right, let's take a look at that. I only dipped it one time for the whole thing. Beat your finger. So here is my galaxy painting background for now. I do think it actually looks pretty nice, and it could help that I've had some practice in the past, but Just keep in mind that as long as it is kind of swirly and colorful and kind of speckly and textured, it's probably going to look something like a galaxy, but they're all going to look very, very different. So this is what my galaxy background looks like. So we're going to let it dry, and then I'll come back and start putting on some planets. Something I thought might be fun is if during the galaxy painting, I could share some fun facts about outer space with you guys. So I'm going to share a few facts. Our first fact is going to be about Pluto. So I think Pluto is the planet that is now considered a dwarf planet, meaning it's so small that it no longer is considered a regular planet. But if, and I'm reading these, if you could fly an airplane to Pluto, the trip would take more than 800 years. So that would be a very long flight. Let's hope you have first class seats. All right, so we are back ready to add planets to our galaxy painting. So there are a couple things to notice here. First of all, we are doing this on paper, and I did notice that one of those spots where I had a water drip, on paper, a water drip can actually cause a hole, and so I do have a little tiny hole developing in my paper here. It's really not a big deal, but I do have a solution for if your paper starts to get a few different holes in it, and I also think this might be a good idea if the paper is just not really ready to take a whole bunch of paint on it. So let's say that, like mine, your paper is getting a hole in it, or you just don't think that you're going to be able to paint any more on this paper without it falling apart. I think it would actually be a really good idea if you make your planets on a separate white piece of paper and then you cut them out and glue them to this paper. I do think that would look really nice. It would actually give it a slightly 3D effect as well. So it could be a really good solution for you. So I'm going to be putting my planets directly on this paper just because that's how I wanted this painting to go. But it's a really good option for you if you're not sure if you want to paint anymore on this paper. If you just put these all three on a white paper and cut them out and glue them to it, okay? So I am going to go ahead and put them on here. But like I said, definitely feel free to put them on another piece of paper. I think it's a really good option. So one thing that I do want to do is make some circles that are very close to perfect, or as close as I can get them. So I actually have some circle shaped things that I want to trace. Now I know just because I'm not a huge fan of how this spot turned out, I just think it's a little too bright. I know I want to cover that up. So I'm thinking I would like to have a big planet that's kind of coming in from the corner like this. And so I'm going to lay this plate down and try to, it's kind of this area I'm not so sure about. So I'm going to cover it like this and trace it with a piece of chalk. If you don't have chalk, a pencil would work. It would just be a little bit harder to see, and I want you guys to be able to see this. So I'm going to do mine with chalk, like that. So that's going to be a nice big planet coming in off the side. And then I have this tape roll, and so I'm thinking, let's see, maybe we should do a planet here, and then maybe a smaller one, maybe like falling off the canvas or the paper up here. So let's do that. So what I would suggest is find your least favorite spots and just cover them with a planet. Let's see, let's do, I actually think that looks really nice. Maybe I don't want to cover that. Let's do a planet here. Oh, it's moving. It's not a very good drawing, but that's all right. And then let's do one up here. Oh, okay, so when I do this one, what I actually want to do is circle the, trace the inside of the circle so that it's a smaller circle. Trace the inside of the tape. All right, doesn't that look pretty good? It looks pretty good. So if, like me, you are putting your planets directly on your paper or your canvas, at this point I actually do want to fill them in with white paint, kind of to erase what's going on behind them, because I want to be able to give my planets a really bright color. I'm not going to get a bright color if I have all this smudgy stuff, especially with all that black going on behind it. So I'm actually going to take a really nice brush now, pure white paint, and I'm just going to fill all three circles in with white. All right, I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet. I have a nice small square-ended brush here with very soft bristles. Now my white paint has a lot of green in it. I'm going to use it anyway because I don't like wasting paint. So let's pick up as much of that green as we can, and let's do this planet here. And if it turns out a little greenish, then we'll just make this kind of a greenish toned planet. So I'm just going to swirl the white paint in there and then get up against the edge, turning it pure white. So this might be a good time for our next fun fact about outer space. And here it is. An astronaut's spacesuit costs $12 million for one spacesuit. So So that is one expensive outfit. All right, so let's get these planets all filled in with pure white paint and I'll come back. All right, so we have finished filling in our planets, and I was thinking about it while I was painting them in, and I'm thinking that I want this one to have the rings of Saturn around it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and add that now with the white so that I can turn that whatever color I want to later. So what I'm gonna do for this is I'm going to go kind of to the middle and put them on a tilt, and I'm going to tilt it that way and that way. So kind of straight, kind of straightish. And then I'm gonna go like this. Round it around. Join it up. So you can kind of see against the white. It's very hard to see, but this should look, I'm gonna kind of make it a little bit more rounded up here too. This should kind of look like it's circling the planet. It's not gonna be perfect now because it's just white paint, but this should give you a nice base later for when it's time to turn this into a color. I'm going to make these a little bit longer. I want it to look like the rings are coming out a little bit further. So I need to make it a little bit more rounded on this edge. There we go. There we go. And make it come out a little further. There we go. All right, so we're going to have a slight Saturn situation on that one. All right. Maybe I should have left a little bit of black in there so that it looked like it wasn't touching, but you know what? I can always put that back in there. And that works too if you're cutting this out of another paper. You can just put a little black on there afterwards. So guess what we have to do now is let these dry. All right, so I have finished filling in my planets here, so we just have to let those dry before we can do anything else to them. So while they're drying, I will give you another fun fact. Did you know that one day on the planet Venus, day meaning from sunrise to sunset, one day is longer than 1 year is on Earth because of how slowly the planet spins. Crazy. All right, so I think it is dry enough for me to start painting my planets. So what I did was I got a new plate with all these bright, pretty, warmish colors, even though green is not a warm color, and white and black are neutrals. And then I still have my old plate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just choose colors for my planets just based on what I'm feeling like at the time. I know I want this one to be really, really bright. Now, I don't want to make it the sun, but I am getting kind of a sun vibe off of this one because it's so big and it's in the corner. So I think I'm going to make this one yellow on the inside and then kind of orangish on the outside. This one I think I'm going to make it like a limeish green, and then I think that one's going to be red. So we're going to try that. I am going to start with this one because I realized that I made just a tiny little bitty mistake that will be easily fixed, and it's that I want to paint in my circle all the way, and so when I do that I'm going to accidentally cover up the rings that I made, so I'm going to have to put that back on there. So I'm going to end up repainting this stripe across here, which is totally fine. It just means I did a little bit extra work. If I were to do this exact painting again, I would just leave this part off until I have my planet turned to the color I want, and then I would just add it on there. So that's just a tip for you guys if you haven't painted this yet. So I'm going to paint in my 3 planets right here with those colors that I said. The other thing I want to do is try to make them look spherical, which means make them look like they're actually round. And so if I'm thinking like this is kind of like my sun, that means this is my light source. So they're going to be brightest down here where they're facing the sun, and then they're going to be darkest on the other side. So we're going to try to do a little bit of shading too. I want to have this at an angle where you can see the planet that I'm actually painting, and it's a little hard when my hand's always covering it. So I'm going to try at this angle here. So I said I wanted to make this one green. I don't want it to be pure lime green, so I'm actually going to mix some of this green with some of the darker green that I was using for the sky. I just think it works a lot better if we keep our planets really bright so that they stand out really well against that dark background. So I'm going to start by just turning this whole thing green, and it's still pretty bright even though I mixed it with some of that dark green, and that's all right. So I'm going to just fill it in with green, just covering that white. If the white is still a little bit wet, then it'll just kind of make the color a little bit more like a pastel version, which is fine as long as you're not cutting all the way through to the background. So I'm going to fill this in with green. All right, so there it all is filled in with green. You can see that I'm getting a little bit of texture from the paper. It's just been painted on a few too many times and it's starting to get a little bit wavy. So if this is my light source right here, this like sun type thing, then that means that the brighter side of this planet is gonna be here facing that, and the dark side is gonna be over here on this end. So what I'm gonna do is on my dirty brush, just a little tiny bit of black paint. And I'm gonna start putting that on this side of the planet. So I'm gonna start like that. So I kind of draw a stripe that's kind of in it a little bit, and then I'm gonna turn my brush, and I'm trying to spread this out a little bit. So I'm gonna spread this to like the dark side of the planet. Like this. Whoops, I got a little outside my lines, that's all right. And I'm just kind of feathering it out. And then on the inside, I just don't want this line to be quite so harsh. So I'm just gonna keep running over it. I didn't add anything new to my brush, but I'm gonna keep adding kind of bigger and bigger strokes, bigger and bigger brush strokes. Like a backwards letter C, like this. See that? So now it looks a little bit like my planet is shaded. All right, so now what I have to do is I have to wash my brush, because now we're gonna do the highlight of the planet, which means the bright side. And if I mix the black paint that was on my brush with the white paint that I'm about to put on, it's gonna turn really, really gray, and we don't want this to look gray. We want this to be pretty bright, intense white. So I'm gonna take a little bit of white on my brush, and I don't wanna spread the highlight as far as I spread the shadow. I just want this to be pretty intense on this side. So I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna keep this one a little closer to the edge. Like that. And then it's gonna spread out just a little bit more. I don't want this to spread as far as the last one did, like I said. I do want to leave a lot of this kind of plain green on the inside. So I'm gonna spread it out just a little bit. Ooh, that came really bright there in the middle. Let's just get rid of that. Here we go. And mix them together, there we go. And then you can always put a little more pure green back on there if you ended up getting rid of most of it. But I think for now, that looks just fine. So I'm gonna clean my brush. I'm going to dry my brush. And now let's do our little tiny planet up here. So let's see, this one was gonna be red. Now we're gonna go for it with pure red. And this is going to be very intense. But I think the painting might look really cool if we have some really intense bright planets. Like this. All right, so now that planet has been turned red. So the dark side of this planet is actually gonna be a little bit harder to do, because technically the dark side of this planet is off of my painting. So I'm gonna pick up just the teeniest bit of black paint, and I'm gonna just kind of, this is what I do. I kind of make it up. Do you see how I'm painting on the tape? And I kind of give myself an idea of where it would have been. And that way I can kind of come in and just act like I'm finishing it. Now, if you don't want to paint on your cardboard, or if you don't have the way to do that, you can just kind of put a little bit of darkness here on the edge, but just make sure that you realize that most of that darkness is actually off of your paper, or off of your canvas. So I'm actually getting a little bit too low with the shading. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean my brush out. Clean my brush out, dry my brush out. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more red paint and just try to bring back some of that brightness. Here we go. I'm just trying to blend it just a little bit better. There we go. So now I have to give my brush a quick rinse, quick dry, and I'm going to add my highlight to this planet. So same thing as last time, little bit of white paint on the brush, just on the edge. This time we're doing kind of this bottom side. Just make sure it's pointing to wherever you're telling us your light source is. So point it there. And then spread it out a little bit, spread it out a little bit. Painting spheres is not the easiest thing to do, and it's a lot of trial and error, which means a lot of getting it wrong before you get it right. But I'm gonna leave it like that actually, because I think that looks really cool. So there are those, so now we have our big one left to do. I am going to be painting in my large planet that I am kind of treating like a sun. And so with that in mind, I'm actually not going to do like a dark and a light side. I'm just going to do yellow on the inside and kind of an orangey ring on the outside. So I think that might be the best way to do it. So I'm going to start with my yellow on the inside. And same thing as this planet that is up that you can't see. Some of this planet is off of my painting, so I have to keep in mind that the middle of this would actually be right around here. So I'm going to start painting this, and I'll share with you another fun space fact. So the astronauts who landed on the moon in the 60s, and I'm embarrassing myself not knowing the exact year, it might have been 1969. The astronauts that landed on the moon left footprints, and they also left tire tracks and a flag, I believe, from their mission, because they were walking around in the dirt and stuff, leaving those footprints and leaving those tire tracks. Did you know that those footprints and those tire tracks will be there for millions of years unless somebody comes and actually erases them? And that's because there's no wind and there's no rain in space. And so the things on Earth that would normally wear away the dirt and that would normally get rid of that kind of stuff don't exist in space. So those footprints and those tire tracks are going to be there for millions and millions of years. So I have it mostly all the way filled in with yellow. So what I'm going to do is take my brush that has yellow on it still, dip in more yellow, and I'm going to dip in some of the orange. And I'm going to make this ring of kind of an orangey yellow, like this. And I'm going to come down into my yellow a little bit with this mixture. I want to kind of make it look like it's fading and blending. So I'm going to come down into my yellow a little bit, like that. And then I'm going to pick up just orange this time. And my brush is dirty, so it's not like I got rid of the yellow, but I'm going to pick up just orange this time and do the outer part of it with just orange. Alright, let's stretch this orange just a little bit further. I'll probably regret doing this, but let's stretch it just a little bit further. I want it to look a little bit more like it starts earlier. Let's do that. I'm on the verge of putting a hole in my paper. I can feel it. It's probably best if I just stop, but I find it really hard to know when to stop. There we go. And that looks pretty good. So now what I have to do for my painting is I have to put the rings back over top of the green there. So again, I do need to let that dry before I do that. And that should be the final part of our painting. I think at this point my planet should be dry enough to put this paint on top of it. And I have come up with a way to turn 2 steps into 1. So what I'm planning to do is to make the rings of my little Saturn planet kind of a pale yellow color. And so because I'm wanting to put white into the color I am going to be covering it with, I don't think I should have to do that white ring around the green first. So we'll see how it turns out, and if we need to, we can go back in and we can do the white again. But I think this should work out just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a color that is yellow and white mixed together, and it should be like a pale yellow. I don't want it to look like it came off of this one, so it needs to be a pretty different color. So that's what I'm going to do first, is mix up my pale yellow color. For this, since I'm going to be working much smaller, I did switch brushes. I'm going to be using this very small pointy brush like this. And like I said, I'm just going to mix up a pale yellow color by taking some yellow and some white. Mix, mix, mix. Alright, so I have mixed up my pale yellow color by doing equal parts yellow and white. And we're going to just fill in our little edge pieces here. Alright, and then when I do the rings going across, I don't want to stretch the entire thing. What I need to do is go at the bottom of both edges. So bottom here and bottom here. What I'm going to do is start by just connecting those two things. So I'm going to go like this. You can see how my paper being a little bit wrinkly is making that a little bit tricky, but that's okay. Okay, so I've done the bottom. Here we go. And so you can see how it looks like it's going around the planet, but that it looks almost, I don't know, it just looks a little bit weird. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to pick up more paint, and I'm going to go above now. There we go. So I'm about halfway up on those edge pieces. There we go. So that looks a little bit better. I'm going to scoot the camera back so you can see this just a little bit more accurately. Here we go. Alright, right, so let's do that, and then let's bring it down just a little further. Maybe just a little bit further down. It's looking just a little bit small. A little further down. So you can see how you're seeing through the yellow paint a little bit where the planet is. It's really not a huge deal. It's not going to bother me a whole lot. So I'm going to do that. And then maybe it's just a little bit plain for me. So maybe I want to put a little bit of, oh, let's see. Let's do a little bit of very pale red, which could also be called pink. But I'm going to make this really, really pale. And I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the yellow so that it gets kind of a salmon color. And let's see if we can jazz this up a little. I don't know if that made it better or worse, but it is what it is. So I'm going to blend it a little by running over it a few times. So blend, blend, blend. I just am not a huge fan when things are just all the same color. I like to have a little variety in whatever it is that I'm doing. I don't know, it looks okay. The sprinkly paper is making my paint go on a little weird, but that's all right. Planets are made of rocks and stuff anyway, right? I got a little white paint out of my brush there that I didn't mean to, but I actually kind of like the way it looks. So I'm going to pick up some white paint on my dirty brush and let's streak some white through there. And what if we just make them random? So what if we just did random streaks like this? Oh, that looks good. Ooh, okay. Maybe I need a little bit darker of a color for my intense. What if I pick up a little bit of orange and a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of black? And orange and black together actually make a really nice brown. So let's put a little bit of brown in there and let's make it kind of random again. Oh, there we go. I like the way this is turning out a lot better. So it's kind of streaky and it looks a little bit more natural. All right, and while I'm finishing up on this, I'll give you our very last space fact, and that is that Venus is the hottest planet in the solar system. So like on Earth, if it got to 100 degrees, that would be a very hot day. It does reach 100 degrees here, but it is very hot. You wouldn't really want to be stuck outside for a long time with 100-degree weather. But on Venus, the temperature can get up to 830 degrees, which is very, very hot. That's like twice the temperature it takes to cook a pizza. Crazy. All right, and then let's see. I know at the beginning I had talked about putting a little space between my planet and my rings. Let's go ahead and try that and see what happens. So on my small skinny brush, I'm going to pick up a little black paint, and I'm actually just kind of almost like I'm cutting out a little section here. You can think of it like an ear. Like if you were going to give your planet ears to hear from. That one might have got a little bit big, but actually it's getting the effect that I wanted. So you can see how it just looks a little bit more like the ring is around the planet instead of sitting right up against it. Ooh, it's mixing with my yellow paint. So I'm going to let it be just like that. So that's the effect I was looking for. All right, so let's get the paint, let's get the tape off of here and see what we think. So there is my finished painting. I'm actually pretty happy with the way this turned out. I didn't know exactly where I was going with it when I started, but I kind of just found it along the way, and I think it looks really nice. I really like the intense bright planets against the dark background, and I think the stars really pop too. So if you're able to make a painting of your own, make sure that you share your pictures with me. You can do it on my social media accounts on Twitter or Instagram at Art with Miss Ohms, or you can email them to me or ask your parents to email them to me at KaylaOhms@WSDR4.org. And I hope you guys are having fun with paint. Bye.